Board members, if we can get you to take your seat. We'll get okay. That was a much welcome break. We're to item 8, which is Committee Chair Joe Wright will give our Finance Committee report from December 8th.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. Like all of you, I have had Christmas and New Year's in between this one, and so my brain probably lost a couple of IQ points. So please be patient with me, and I welcome any input or thoughts from any of the Finance Committee members if I'm missing anything. Most of it are updates, and so you're welcome to read that, and I don't think it's really my job to read or summarize just kind of updates or just committee level stuff. And I'm really just going to focus on motions that we're bringing to the board. So the first issue, and this is complicated. There's something called the educator salary adjustment, where the LEAs need to submit certain materials to us so that we can pay bonuses to teachers. And unfortunately, there are multiple steps where this can be goofed up. It can be goofed up by the teacher not submitting it. It can be goofed up by the LEA, and it can also be goofed up by us. Unfortunately, we were the ones who goofed it up for some teachers. And LEAs turned it on time. It's part of our program. I think we've since corrected it. And so we looked at that, and even though it's going backwards and we had deadlines, given it was our mistake, we felt that we should certainly pay these teachers the bonuses that they were entitled to and that they had completed the materials for and their LEA had. There are also some that the LEAs the teachers had submitted it, but the LEAs had goofed up. And so those were our two motions. I do think, in case you think we're Santa Claus, if the teacher did not submit by the deadline, we drew the line there and said, sorry, we are sad, and it's maybe even to some extent unfair, but you do have to make this deadline. So that is my understanding of what we did. Any of our staff or Finance Committee members? Good. Okay. So we have two motions. Do I read those? Okay. So first motion. The committee moves that the board authorize staff to run new Cactus data polls for the impacted LEAs in Scenario 1 using the reporting errors and use the new data to calculate the amount due to the LEAs in the mid-year update for 2018.
Okay. The motion before the board is that the board authorize staff to run new Cactus data polls for the impacted LEAs in Scenario 1 using the reporting errors and use the new data to calculate the amount due to the LEAs in the mid-year update for 2018. Any discussion to the motion?
And this is essentially where kind of we didn't do as good of a job maybe as we could have, but we've since figured it out.
Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting was unanimous. And then the next motion.
Next one is the committee moves the board authorize staff to pay the LEAs for the teachers that were not submitted by November 15th deadline in scenarios 2 and 3.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board authorize to pay the LEAs for the teachers that were not submitted by the November 15th deadline in scenarios 2 and 3. Any discussion to the motion?
Chair Huntsman, this is where the teachers submitted on time, but the LEAs had failed to do so, I think.
Okay, not seeing any other motion or any other discussions. So let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting is unanimous.
And the next thing is we've created a rule. It's somewhat surprising. It's kind of been in limbo for several years. We've kind of nailed it down to where our own procurement rule when we buy things. As you all know, we buy sometimes, things that cost millions of dollars in the procurement process that we should follow. It is complicated. As our school districts know, there's a lot of state law that governs this. And I was interested to learn there's a lot of federal law that governs this. So both myself and I think Chair Huntsman and all of us were a little bit concerned that a procurement process was fairly cumbersome. But in order to comply with all the grants and different funding, they felt this was necessary, and Deputy Jones said we can do it. So we voted unanimously to approve Rule 277-122. So the committee voted, so here's the motion. Well, no, excuse me, here's the motion. The committee moves that the board approve Rule 277-122 as amended on second reading.
Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approve R277-122 as amended on second reading. Any discussion to the motion? Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. I know this is talking about procurement, but is there any way to include the audit standards or any of those other standards in this? Because we're still in limbo on what guidelines to follow there.
Well, this was
So this is only procurement?
This is procurement.
Okay, thank you.
Limited to procurement. Board Member Hanson.
So explain to me why, is this tighter than state procurement? Because I would think that we would need to use state procurement.
Deputy Superintendent.
And that we would be required, I'm sorry, I haven't been on the Finance Committee, so I don't know. So, but I would imagine that we would be required to use state procurement.
Actually, it's more in line with what we're proposing. It aligns us more properly with state code and state purchasing and all that too. So that's really, we were somewhat out of alignment. So we're trying to get in there too. So we're following that lead.
Okay, yeah, because I would expect.
Yeah, follow up. Okay, you're good. Follow up.
Chair, Board Member Hanson, the state, a lot of the procurement law puts the burden on the individual entities to create their own kind of internal procurement process and just comply with that.
Right.
Deputy Jones.
And we're also aligning state with federal standards too. So it does kind of go to what Board Member Belknap was starting to talk about or on that too. So by virtue of this process and by changing this too, we're standard and matching so that, if an audit does take place, that, when we train on it, individuals that are trained in these processes or these policies and code on that know what to expect by way of the audit or compliance or anything like that, both state and federal standards. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Belknap, do you have more? No, thank you. Okay. Okay, the motion, again, I'll restate the motion. The motion before the board is to approve R277-122 as amended on second reading. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Voting is unanimous.
The next, we have a number of different sections within the Utah State Board of Education, offices and departments. If they, to their credit, haven't spent their entire budget, what do we do? And we don't want to encourage people just, spending their budgets to spend their budgets. So we looked at that, we talked about that, and I think really the only motion board is the assessment and accountability section. They brought a spend plan with some carry forward funds for, was it the year ending December 31st? Or I can't remember. June 30th. For some stuff that we found acceptable. So it's really fairly minor, but the committee moves the board approve the spend plan for the assessment and accountability section.
Okay, the motion before the board is to approve the spend plan for the assessment and accountability section. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting was unanimous.
All right, this next item is not a motion, but is something that at least I felt was important. In light of recent events, several boards have been shocked to find out the level of settlement on sexual harassment claims, and some employees that have been retained, or at least boards claim they're surprised by that. So we asked for that data and wanted to make it public, and there have been no reported sexual harassment claims involving the Utah State Board of Education in the past 5 years. So we don't see a pattern of problems. With that said, I hope that it, sometimes if there are no reports, that's also suspicious. If there are, I hope that, reports are made. It's a new day. We're going to take them serious. And then we, put in some interesting data requests. You're welcome to read that, and some things we're thinking about that are a long way from, being motions, but some interesting stuff. I think that's everything, Chair Huntsman.
Okay, that concludes our summary of actions that come from our finance committee before the board today.